pandemic, the world has shifted from an offline to an online platform. Online teaching brings with it opportunities as well as challenges. And most of us are concerned about these challenges. We have with us a team of experts to deliberate about online education, opportunities, and challenges. Ma'am, over to Shalja ma'am, moderator of panel discussion.
Yeah, thank you, Gayatri.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. I am Dr. Shailaja Raj, moderator for the session, and I extend my warm welcome to all the panelists for today's discussion on opportunities and challenges of online education. Before we go into the discussion, let me introduce the panelists to all of you. Dr. Vidya Jonnalagadda, a renowned biologist and researcher, MD and site head for Arcus Therapeutics startup company. Dr. Sujata Eruva, Associate Professor, St. Francis College and IVLP alumni. Dr. Jovita Joseph, Head Department of Microbiology, LVPI Network. Welcome to all of you, ma'am. Dr. Vidya, ma'am, Sister Sujata,
thank you,
and Dr. Jovita. Welcome to all of you once again. We are all aware of how nature has taught us to adapt to new challenges and sudden revolutionary changes in education during the last 2 years. Moving from traditional teaching to online mode, as Gayatri has mentioned, and how we are all equipped ourselves to protect the academic schedule. You know, how we have worked really hard and keep the learning process going despite the pandemic and where everything was shut down. We still continue to be and protect the academic schedule of a student. The online mode of education has brought in lot of opportunities to students. We do agree with that. In terms of accessibility of time and space, place where they can take up a new course, affordability that they can join any institute which is of repute, which otherwise they wouldn't have been able to join, improved student attendance, suitability to variety of learning styles, and efficiency to deliver to the students. So these were some of the opportunities that the students are having through this online education. But my question to you, Vidya ma'am, where does India stand? Did we progress? How do we rate India's ability to compete on a global scale to implement STEM practices into the classroom online? Ma'am, do you have any suggestions related to that? Or have we reached to that stage? If not, then how do we go about doing it?
Thank you, Shailaja, for this question. I have two things to say. As a person who has studied in the US and my child also studied in the US, I can say that we are nowhere compared to the way that they teach in US, because there is some kind of emphasis on marks, and there is a lot of emphasis on giving the standard answer. The previous speaker, she was saying that we should accept other people's answers, students various answers, but sadly right from school they are made to memorize some kind of a model answer, and every student just writes it, and so the expression of thinking is not developed, right? And also most of the questions are based on memory, and very few questions are based on analysis or exploration. So I think we should honestly say that we do not match anywhere there. So you can just take a look at the syllabus for various universities, US universities, and compare it with the syllabus we have, and our syllabus is very low in standard. I feel very sad to say this, because this is our country and we want our students to do well, but we are stuck by some old syllabus set by 4 years ago or 10 years ago or something, and there is very little freedom to the teacher to teach something. We are still teaching with textbooks rather than primary research papers, especially in STEM. The latest, like if you ask the students which are the past 3 Nobel Prizes, what did they do? It's not yet in our syllabus. So we are lagging behind. And
so what do you think are your suggestions? How do we go about doing it?
Yeah, the suggestion is to, let students do at least something which is outside the syllabus, which is keeping track of. The simplest thing is, every student should, let's say, know the last 5 years Nobel Prizes, or some other new technologies which have come. Every journal, at least read one paper a year, latest paper. And without that, we are going to fall behind. Our students just know what's in the books, but they don't know how to apply it, how to use that knowledge to understand something which is not in the textbook.
So that means your suggestion could be like incorporating innovative thinking among the students and go ahead and inculcating their
So but
creativity.
first it should come to teachers. You are all my friends and sisters, but the problem is that we are also fixed on the textbooks, isn't it? Like,
yes,
you have made a very good program. This is one of the best faculty improvement programs because you're trying to teach new technology or something. But often the teachers are just teaching from some textbook, and I don't know any teacher who teaches from primary literature. But my experience is limited, right? You may know some teachers who do that. Even at MSc level, we are still teaching from textbooks rather than reading a research paper.
Yes, ma'am.
And so the students don't know the process of science. They know, for example, they know that structure of DNA is something, or this is how translation happens. But how did people find it out, right? What are the technical challenges that people have overcome? How do you make stem cells? How do you extract stem cells? How do you make stem cells differentiate into something that can work as therapy, right? So this disconnect between research and textbooks is the biggest pitfall I see. How to overcome it? I don't know, ma'am, but do you think most of our teachers are themselves trained to read research papers? So, there is a stumbling block. So unless teachers,
teacher competency is something which is
especially in this part, like to read and explain primary literature. Yes. Till we do that, we are going to lag behind.
Yes, ma'am, definitely. So I think the takeaway from this could be like improving the proficiency of a teacher, and then that percolating into the level of the student would be something which is very interesting aspect that every teacher or any institution has to look at. Maybe the policy in terms of government also, how this can be done at the level of the institution, at the level of the curriculum development is what we need to think of. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your suggestion. And the most, now since we know the opportunities that are there, and now we go into what are the challenges that we have, the most common challenges that we see when we talk about online courses or online classes is the technical issues. Many students talk about it. Distractions that they have because they are logging in through some device and then they are at their homes. A lot of distractions. Time management is something which is very important. Staying motivated and understanding course expectations, lack of in-person interaction, and adapting to unfamiliar technology. This is something which is very, everybody has to get adapted to. And uncertainty about the future, whether their course will be recognized, did they get all the competences required through this online education. These are some of the challenges that we are looking at. Now, my question to Sister Sujata would be, is the use of technology mandatory or essential in STEM education? And how do these financially challenged institutions where they do not have access to technology, can they implement STEM education? And if so, then what are your suggestions and how they have to go about implementing STEM into their courses?
Thank you, ma'am, for this elaborated question. You have already mentioned the challenges many complaints we see from both the students as well as teachers side. Basically, there is a reduced face-to-face support from teacher to student, and then maybe low motivated students, self-motivated students find it much more difficult in this environment. and managing screen time and inability to focus
Yes.
on the screen. Also, sense of isolation when they are seated together, they are in group working together. There is a lot of high motivation. So again, the online teaching takes to the toll of a sense of isolation on the people's. Um, Also, quality assurance concerns are there, and lots and lots of limitations to technology or internet and technical skills, like maybe lack of internet access or stable connections with adequate speed, or a loss of continuity of learning for the children when they find these kind of technical glitches due to slow connections and so on. Cost also involved, that was another big challenge that is there. And above all, that is teacher training. Yeah. Uh, mm,
To adapt to the technology.
Adopt to the technology is very, very important. And is the use of technology is mandatory? Yes, it is a desirable option. Technology is an indispensable component of any STEM or a project-based learning activity. It is the skill set that governs the way we think and behave on the whole. And the technology contributes to the design and implementation of all the activities related to STEM in multiple ways.
Yeah, but then yesterday when I was hearing to Valeska's lecture on problem-based learning process, she was trying to be so innovative and then trying to, with simple things like creating something, giving a problem to a students to create or some innovative thing using the material that is left around here and there. So I think having technology use to introduce STEM education into the system may not be that important. Main thing is the idea, how to inculcate the interest, the innovation, and the design, the thinking process into the student mind is more important than technology. Yes, it's essential for online teaching, but it will come at a later stage. But all these also can be done. This is what I feel, sister. What is your take on that?
True. I only am saying that technology gives wings to go further.
Yeah,
that's what I'm trying to say. Of course, whatever is the base, the main science and technology is there. Technology helps us to go further.
Yes.
That's what I feel. So that's why the technology can be used in a direct integration and embedded of technology into STEM activities, or using technology as a tool or facilitator to enrich STEM PBL, that is project-based learning.
Yes, sister, it will definitely help.
Yeah.
Another thing is, do you think that this is going to bring about the STEM education, that the type of design thinking that we are talking about into the system of a student, where we are trying to inculcate innovation and develop themselves to think on their own and such kind of activities? Are they going to bring about holistic development of the student, overall personality of the student? Does it contribute to that?
Yes, of course. Ever-changing and increasingly complex world, it's more important the technology combined in a STEM education. It brings knowledge and skills to solve the problems, make sense of information, and know how to gather and evaluate evidences to make decisions, think critically, solve problems, and use creatively. It prepares students to work in fields that are poised for growth. Enhances skills lies at the heart of the STEM education. Skills that can be used throughout life to help them to get through tough times and take advantage of opportunities whenever they appear.
Yes.
They play a vital role in developing meaningful solutions to social problems, like now, such as COVID-19 public health crisis we are currently facing.
Yes.
So setting up students for future success means exposing them to these disciplines holistically in order to develop their critical thinking skills.
Yes, sister, that's really nice. And see, so many institutions now have already incorporated STEM education, and they're trying to do the little bit of whatever they can do to introduce into their education system. but how to create sustainability in such kind of organizations? See, doing something, sustenance is more important than just doing it and leaving it at that. It has to continue and it has to grow and it has to move forward. So, what is your idea and how you think organizations, what are the things that they have to do to sustain such kind of activity throughout the life of the student in their institution?
Yeah, like our own college, we have different student clubs through which we engage our students,
Yes.
like the Spectrum Club, initiated by all the sciences.
Department.
And we concentrate on less fortunate students who do not have that opportunity to kind of facilities that we have. Like even our department, computer science, we have started a series of Connect series with hands-on workshops, like working on drones and robotics and things like that. And my IBLP program exposed me to different science centers like Orlando Science Center and Caltech, MIT premises and so on, where they, from infants onwards, they keep initiating children into this STEM education, creating such type of curiosity in them and helping them to explore further. And then, of course, from family and the teacher and teachers, teaching faculties, and as well as government policies, all of these things put together creates a proper base for a child to get inserted into this STEM-based education.
Yeah. So sustainable organizations is something we need to look at, and to continue this process, just not introduce it and leave it, but you have to sustain it and grow further along with this and carry forward throughout the time when the student is there in the institutions and future more generations in future more. So we are all aware that there is a shift from conventional learning to online learning. Not only during this pandemic, but I think this has become because of the plenty of opportunities that this online mode is trying to give to the students. It's going to be the norm, I felt, and the future of education, as pointed out by Dr. Srinivas, who was giving a lecture on open educational resources. And he was talking about the UGC is going to bring this blended online mode of teaching into the curriculum. And as the best practices of STEM education online, we need to have a certain type of collaborations from an industry and research institutes together to bring in that kind of interaction with the industry, because you need to work towards societal needs and all that. So how do we go about bringing these inputs into the classroom and education? Maybe Jovita, who's from a research institute, would be the best person to answer this.
I have a different view from what was told so far. Am I audible?
Yes, Jovita.
Yeah, so I think this pandemic has shown us, it's more like, Charles Darwin's adaptability and survival of the fittest. We have learned how to use technology much better than what we originally used. From a simple mobile phone and chatting, we've learned what all opportunities are possible. Yeah. Today, we have virtual conferences, entire conferences where we are exposed to so much of work going on all over the world, in fact. So I think there is a good side to it also. But yes, it has reduced the interpersonal interactions between people. And I think that is the only drawback where we have to learn how to work in a group, and social skills is probably something that is reducing, but exposure has improved tremendously. Yes. Because so I think the way forward, I think the virtual conferences are in to stay for a while, because we really learn a lot, and we can, sitting in our offices, we can attend so many things at so many places, which otherwise would not be possible. So it will stay.
Now, we connected with so many other resource persons for this particular conference. So it's one of the best way of doing it. But how do we bring in the inputs from industry and research institutes into our curriculum? How can we go about doing these collaborations or something?
I am at a loss over there, because I also, whenever I have students who ask me for dissertation, we have restricted them to writing review papers, but beyond that, we've asked them to come and visit us.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Vidya ma'am, do you have any suggestions for this? How to incorporate industry and
Yeah, so that's going to be very hard, right? Because the number of as we go, it's like a pyramid, right? The UG students are maximum, then there are some PG, then there are some research, and the research labs. Though we are very lucky in Hyderabad to have many research labs, they are very busy. And when I used to work at CCMP, we used to get some students, and honestly, they were so unprepared, right? So they are not at the stage where they can actually contribute to the research. So it is I feel very bad saying it, but it is a drain on the researchers' time, because you can't stop your research and you cannot really train them.
yeah.
So, and also outsourcing teaching to research, professional research labs is not, going there for 1 or 2 months is not going to make a big difference. What ma'am said, Jovita, is writing a review is a wonderful research experience, because, it's secondhand, it's okay, but you are thinking about the process, you're learning how to do it. This insisting that people should do a project sometimes is it just is good on paper, but to apply it in, to actually make it work in practical sense is very difficult. If you mean
Yeah.
actual, experimental project, but a thought project is great. Learning to read and write, and make some kind of a
Yeah, and design to make their own project is something which we need to teach at our curriculum itself.
it's,
They
I mean, I can design a wonderful project, but can I actually do it?
implementation.
Because it might require various
Yes.
facilities which I don't have.
Yeah.
And the other thing I want to say is that this internship creates a stress, next level of stress, because some students get it, some students don't get it, and then people are worried about it, and it just creates a, inequality among students. And so
But as teachers, I think we need to give them maximum exposure in terms of what is happening around in terms of different research activities that are going around in different institutes. We need to give such kind of an exposure to the student, so that they have an idea of these are the type of research activities that go on, and how these research activities that are going on are helpful in terms of solving problems in the society around, and how they are contributing towards the societal needs.
Actually,
Something that they need to.
this year in September, the CCMB actually organized their open day also virtually. So people
Yeah,
could go and see all their research works that are going on. But again, bench work will have to be hands-on. I don't know whether that cannot be happen virtually. We can exposure, and they can see whether they generate any interest is generated among them.
Interest generation is something which I think all teachers have to look at as professors or teachers at the different levels of schools, colleges, and all that. We need to inculcate that interest, and we need to make them exposed to what are the things that are happening around, and what is the contribution of the research that is happening around from these institutes into the level of the student. And then only they start to get to thinking. And this is my feeling. I hope, is it right, ma'am? Vidya ma'am, what do you think, Sister?
Yes, I am sorry. I'm going to come back to that. My favorite topic about Nobel Prize lectures, right? So that's something that people can do. It is something which has happened. Maybe they started 20 years ago, right? Some people like Barbara McClintock, she got the Nobel Prize after a very long time, whereas this year's Jennifer Doudna, she got it at a relatively short time, right? And so how long does it take for people to accept your research as something which is a paradigm shift? So those things also, it's when we say exposed to research, it's not only the technique of research, but also the response of society to research. And so people get sometimes they get frustrated or disheartened, like I'm doing all this and nobody's paying attention or giving me enough credit. And to, like the previous ma'am was saying, to make a student emotionally and intellectually strong, right? And so,
and that was a wonderful lecture, I felt, giving all different types of aspects of what a teacher should have, and how she should look at the student in terms while she's teaching in a classroom. It was
Yeah.
really nice
Yeah.
lecture, but sorry we couldn't have time to
Yes.
explore more on that. But it was really nice. Thank you, ma'am, Vidya ma'am. This, I think, is another important question that I would like to ask you because, when we talk about equity in classroom, or supporting the outcome of the students of all different backgrounds, whether you're slow learner or a advanced learner or different type of abilities that the student has. It is essential to give rise to a productive learning environment from the teacher's point of view. I was really interested in this idea of equitable outcomes for students rather than providing equitable opportunities for STEM education. What do you think, or what are the ways in which we can do this, ma'am?
Who are you asking this question?
To you, yes, ma'am.
Okay, right. So I feel that our students, they come in a big range. Their capabilities as well as their interests, as well as their motivation,
Yes.
and there is only a little that we can do to move them. Because we don't see them, though they are in college for a long time. We don't really see them for enough time. Sometimes you see the student only for one semester or even half a semester because you are sharing the paper with somebody else. And so at an undergraduate level, it's really hard to make the students all come to some kind of a equitable meaning, like a kind of uniform outcome. It's very, very difficult. I don't see how we can do it because we cannot push students beyond a certain limit so that they rise, nor can we like bring down some students to so that they are.
No, that's where, according to their abilities, their outcomes have to be, matched. This is what I meant by when I say equity, because
Right.
they
So
have different abilities, different capacities.
This is where I think online learning gives a very good chance for differentiated learning. So you might have heard of the Khan Academy model, right? So you have, let's say, 10, you have to answer 10 questions correctly in a row. Let's say you answer 9 correctly and the 10th one you get wrong, you again go back to the start. And so that way, if somebody is slow and then they can go at their pace, they're not worried because the class has gone very fast. And in classroom teaching, we have to choose some pace and continue. Some are falling behind and some are getting bored, but we have to just cater to some kind of a median group, right? But the online provides an excellent opportunity for this to so you have a basic lecture. It will take time to make those resources, but you have a basic lecture which everyone should follow. But those who have completed it can have 1 or 2 like add-on lectures that they have seen or add-on exercises that they have seen, so that they are not feeling pulled back. So
I think it is basically giving rise more number of opportunities to the student and making a learning process rather than memory or testing them.
Yeah, of course. And so, it is also to their interest. Maybe a student is interested in one topic, but not the other. So they can do the basic of one topic and 2 advanced units. So, the syllabus planning should be such that everyone has to complete a basic level, but at least 2 advanced topics. And so it could be reading. It need not be a video. It need not even be a live lecture. But like Jovita ma'am said, so those who have completed that advanced unit get some time with the teacher, either virtually or in person. Yes. To demonstrate or to demonstrate that they have learned it, or to ask questions or whatever. And so you can have grading based on that also. You see proficiency, and this really helps you when you have to write recommendation letters. You can actually give good recommendation, a specific recommendation that this student has shown interest and proficiency in this particular topic.
Yes, and at the same time, you're giving an opportunity for a slow learner to
so they don't feel frustrated.
Multiple times of options where they can take the test. Yesterday, somebody was talking about 2 times you can give an option to take it.
So, a number of practice tests which they can do at their own level, and it is self-graded. So even you don't need to know, right? Sometimes people are just stressed out because if they fail, then the teacher might scold them, or even if they don't scold them, they feel the loss of, it's a dignity, right? You feel undignified that you're failing. So this self-testing would be
online
wonderful.
Provides a better opportunity for such kind of.
Yeah, it should be. I mean, program should be designed to do that. The person can take the test many times, and then you have a question bank of about, let's say, 500 questions. It's not so hard to do, and so you set it up with the help of your IT team so that they keep getting different questions or different options to the same question.
Yeah.
So that would be great, right? So you have one question with 10 answers, but one is correct. And every time they get it, some scrambled, 3 wrong answers are given. So,
yes,
so they can't memorize the answer also.
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
So can I intervene here, ma'am? Actually, I had very good exposure with my own students during this pandemic. After once we are done with our syllabus, we have gone through, okay, there is a lot of data that is available, and I was teaching data mining tools and so on. So I thought, let us take each student different area and let us analyze and see, let us come up with some kind of results. And each one of them was so actively participating, and we have come up even to writing papers and discussions, open discussions. We try to contact to the persons who actually contributed the data, and it was very healthy discussion, and then everybody felt engaging, and then it was a real, like a complete implementation of what we have studied as a part of theory in real time. So yeah,
that's really nice, sister, to hear. And can we have some questions from the audience? From the participants, participants. Ravi, I'm not able to see the chat.
I see a question. She says, how can parents, what's the role of parents in virtual STEM learning?
Yeah.
By one Sunita Draksha, she has asked us this question.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am, can you take over that?
Yeah, sure. So I think the first thing that parents can provide is a good device to their students and a quiet place where they can study. Try not to have the TV on or some other activity going on so that the student is distracted while they are studying. Other than that, the actual technique, or what you can say, subject knowledge, unless the parent knows it, they may not be able to help. But certainly a financial contribution from the parents is what we expect, right? Like they are paying for the internet, or they are paying for a good device. Other person has asked, ma'am, how do I make my online class comfortable for my students?
Yeah.
I think make it interactive. That is where the students are forced to participate. If it's a monologue lecture, that is where they lose out on interest. Interactive sessions are always helpful.
So I would like to add a few words here, because my class sometimes, like I'm going to start a class now which has 57 students, and that's a huge number. There is no way that I can give everybody some time. And also one strange thing I have observed is that because these classes are recorded, so most students don't attend the class as such, so I can see how many participants are there. So though there are 57 students, maybe 20 or 15 will attend it. And when I asked what they do, so what they do is, because this recording is available, then tomorrow, like today's class, they will listen tomorrow at 2x speed. So thinking that they're saving time, right? So they're always one day off, and they're listening to yesterday's lectures today. And it's very difficult to insist on attendance. But one thing that I noticed done at the primary school level is that teacher would schedule what she called small class. So she would have 5 students or 4 students for half an hour every week, only those 5, right? And so that way she could make sure that she has at least 4 or 5 minutes to talk to each student personally, but not during the main class. So this is an additional work for this teacher, because she has to schedule this personal time with students. But that is one way which can be done each week have by lottery 5 students who you will interact with without the rest of the class.
One interesting question here from Dr. Tushar Botz. In the present scenario of continuous evaluation system, how do we maintain the interest and ability to resolve problems pertaining to particular subject? Is the question. Sister, can you take it? Did you get it, sister?
So can you please repeat, ma'am? I missed the question.
It is from
Basically, it's asking how do you maintain the
Evaluating.
interest of the students to resolve problems in a particular subject or topic.
Yeah, I think already Vidya ma'am has already responded to this question. Basically, even Jovita has responded to this. Involve them in with more discussion kind of thing, project based. Maybe give them a problem and then involve them more in giving them assignments like okay, explore certain things and then okay, present that particular scenario in this particular culture and so on. So they feel more responsibility and then they start exploring things and then I think they start learning. So that way we can initiate the interest, not just one way, but it should be two ways.
Yeah. And this is another question. Letting them from groups to do something outside the syllabus. How do you go about, have you tried with your own students as somebody is asking?
Oh, I had asked that somebody, Malti said that she has, so that was in response to her. Maybe you didn't see the question she had asked.
Okay, we forgot to.
Yeah, that is, I had answered her question. She asked me if it is okay to, make groups of students kind of based on their level, sort of, and then have them do some activities. And I felt that as long as the students are doing it, self-forming groups themselves, then you're not in a difficult situation. But if I start making groups of students and, in my mind, I know these are the strong students, these are the weak students, it kind of doesn't sit well with the students who feel like they are being labeled as some particular category, right? So letting the students form their own groups and say, come up with your own problem, I will help you. That's a safer thing for teachers to do instead of we making groups and assigning topics, because then it just there's a lot of unhappiness. People feel that that group got better topic or this group got.
But don't you think we see some problems associated with that? Like, all the good students or competitive students come together and then
but they're not competing against the rest of the class, right? They are just doing something extra. So if in a quiz competition I segregate good and weak students, then you feel bad because one team is now skewed. But if they are doing something outside extra on their own time, right? Sure, why not do it?
But suppose if you have an advanced learner with a slow learner together, maybe the slow learner would, in association with an advanced learner, would pick up certain things.
Yeah, so
my idea of a teacher.
You're absolutely right. Lots of research, many research projects have shown that if you club advanced learner with a slow learner, they do that. The slow learner picks up much better than they would with the teacher, and the advanced learner becomes stronger. They are not losing anything. So it has been done, but there is also a matter of personal chemistry, right? So if you put together two people who just don't like each other, then the whole exercise becomes difficult. Clash of personalities. Therefore, I said let the students choose their friends, because we don't know outside the classroom what is the tension between them.
Yeah,
that's exactly what I wanted to add to, because what we are dealing with are young adults. It is very difficult for us to form groups. Their chemistry is totally different between them.
Yes.
And also I'll say, ma'am, because you're a girls' college, it might be easier. But when I was teaching in a co-ed college, it is really difficult to put to balance the boys and girls, because it creates a different kind of a new effect is created, and we don't want to deal with that. Because some boys, they just start harassing, I'm sorry to say, but they just start harassing the girls who are in their group. And how do you protect them then?
Yes, definitely, ma'am. So when we talk about team activity and individual activity with students, we understand that we need to create an atmosphere wherein they try to identify the real problems that are around, and they have to find solutions to those real problems in a community. So as a teacher, we need to inculcate that into our curriculum, that they look at the societal needs, and they pick up certain things that are required by the society, and they start thinking that solutions to those kind of problems. So this thinking has to get inside. But when it comes to institutions, different places have worked differently in different areas, or practice by different institutions is different. Do you have any studies or case studies or examples of your own organizations or any other way in which you can do it differently? My question to Sister Sujata.
Yeah, ma'am. As I said that there are a lot of opportunities that we can pose here. Actually, like our own department, we have said that like we have conducted a lot of workshops where we have included so many varieties of students from various backgrounds, and hands-on practices helped them to pose a lot of face a lot of challenges and then explore things, and then the kind of questions that they have come up at the end of each session, it was wonderful for us. Like it helped us to think forward, like okay, what else we are going to look forward for the next coming sessions and things like that. So such type of opportunities will help.
Yes, sister, definitely. And a lot of discussion on the chat box. Really, I'm impressed with the participants having so much of inputs from their side. There's one question from here from Dr. Aruna. Madam, how do we make sure that the students are with the class throughout the session? So grabbing students' interest is something which is very important for a teacher. Yes.
I want to say that we should not take this burden on ourselves because we cannot carry it, I'm just saying you'll go mad if you try to catch everyone, because see, all you can do is control yourself. You give a great talk, you give a great lecture, but if people have, they have like turned on their camera, turned on their device, but they're actually doing something else, we cannot be their parole officers. I tell my colleagues, they are not, they are adults now, they're over 18, and we want them, we welcome them, we want them to be there. But if they are not there, and if we keep thinking about those who are not there and trying to call them in, we are kind of not paying attention to the people who are there, who are actually showing some interest. And so those who are not there, maybe a different something, you have to give them a different assignment or a written assignment or something else. But in the class, we have to just focus on who is there. We cannot, that's my answer. If you can see, I say we have to just accept that some students will not attend, or they may be physically present, but they're mentally absent and can't do much about it, right? So let's not take this burden on ourselves, because it distracts you from giving a good talk because you're worried about how many people are looking at you.
This is exactly what somebody is saying here in the chat box. I think it's from Vidya. The most pressing problem. It's you, ma'am. Okay.
Yeah, I have been answering some questions because,
Okay, that's nice.
Yeah, because I feel, while somebody else is answering, I'm listening.
Yeah, I was thinking somebody else is.
No, so some of them
so
I have
continuous
answered.
assessment also would help students to focus. Okay, there is a that also controls students, and then maybe pay attention to, and then such type of systems also would help students to pay attention.
If I can add, actually one method that I do during my webinars and talks is I conduct polls in between. Like after whatever I have talked for a while, I give a poll question and I ask them, audience, you can incorporate those tools in your presentation. So they have to click and answer themselves. So just to see that how many are answering, how many have like understood whatever I have talked till now. So I do this at regular intervals of the talk.
That's nice, Jovita. I think we also had a session on that, where how we include questions into your presentations, and we had a insight into that during the workshop that we organized. Teachers have to get into such kind of activities where they can, keep up the students' interest and till the end of their talks. Yeah, thank you, Jovita, for that. And then nowadays, everybody is talking about innovation, design thinking process. What does this innovation and design thinking process mean? And we think like, how we can inculcate this among the student. And what do you think is the role of an educator in introducing this? And when, at what stage do we start this kind of a thing? Maybe Jovita can answer this.
I think we all have to shift to the concept of the open book exam, where it doesn't matter what books is in front of you. The questions are such that they will have to think differently and give their answers on new research ideas or problems based on current affairs. That is the only thing I think. I mean, that was how I was graded when I started to do my PhD. And even today, I remember all of us brought our Leninger, brought all those big books and came, but nothing. There was no question from that at all. We were all lost with drawing the genetic diagrams, the pool, the lineages, and all of that, because we had no clue from which book to take anything.
Maybe case studies would be something which would really help them to, come out with their own answers. As ma'am said earlier, Vidya ma'am said, answers could be many, from different point of view from different students. So case study is something which is an important tool, I think, which would help students, help them into thinking and innovating something new or different, or giving a good different type of a solution to different types of problems that are being posed. I mean, that would be one of the wonderful tool that every teacher should use. But at what stage do we inculcate this? Is it
right from day one? Right from day one, because why not? And if the longer, let's say in the first year of college, I'm taught to think, then I have 3 years to practice my skill. Oftentimes what happens, people say this we will teach when you come to MSc. Many people are not going to come to MSc, right? They will branch off after BSc. So every day is a wonderful day to teach good stuff. So right from first, I think at least 50%, at least 20% of the question paper should not be memory based. It should be based on something which is application. And certain topics are very easy to make applied questions where you cannot memorize, like the genetics problems or biochemistry problems. You cannot memorize that. Some other subjects, it may be harder to come up with it. But over years, these resources are not created overnight. It's over years you develop a good, solid database of these questions. And once you have one question, one thought-provoking question, by slight change of the option or the conditions which you are giving to the student, so that's actually infinite questions, because you're changing something, right?
A parameter or something.
So some small thing in the question you can change, right? But if we are not looking to create such questions, then we will not have them. So I think the HODs have a wonderful opportunity to make sure that every question paper they set have at least 20% questions, like 2 out of 10, or at least 1 out of 10, which is not just memory based. And slowly over years, over 3-4 years, you will have hundreds of such questions.
Yeah. There's somebody who's asking, how can we improve digital accessibility for the students?
Right. I would like to answer that. And this is also, I'm taking a question which sister had answered, which is like, what do we do? What is the challenge between the, for the economically or otherwise struggling colleges, right? I feel every college is struggling because you never have enough money to do everything that you want. And in fact, this digital has given an inordinate advantage to the poorer colleges, because the most expensive thing that a college requires is the rooms, the land and the building and the labs and stuff like that. And now the poorer colleges, they can compete with grand colleges, because you don't need the classrooms, right? And I feel if the government does something like it allows this blended mode, even after the pandemic is over, hopefully next year we will be back to 2019 status. But let's say I have a small college, and I can say on 2 days it's for science students and 2 days it's for commerce students, because I have only 4 classrooms. I can accommodate more students, right? Right now the most limiting factor is the number of classrooms. We are not able to accept more students because we don't have enough classrooms. And to each student who joins, right, you give them a small iPad, maybe not iPad, Galaxy, which is a small tablet, which is their own, right? We anyway take some lab fees or something. So, and also the college provides them the connection, right? A subscription to unlimited internet, which isn't very expensive. It's like 2,000 rupees per year. That's not much, right? But if the college, let's say, St. Francis has 3,000 students, imagine how you can negotiate with Airtel or BSNL or whatever, and get a student rate for this, right? For the student. And that's how you make the digital tools available to the students. You are able to run excellent courses without having much physical infrastructure. So I hope that colleges and the government takes note of this, that even with no access to classroom, people were studying. So, give colleges the option of having blended courses where only the student comes to college only 2 days, but of course the rest of the time they are attending online courses. It's not like they are only coming for 2 days, right? But 2 days in person and rest outside. So even weaker colleges, which are basically in the suburbs or in the villages, they can do very well now.
Then government also had initiated like Diksha portal, e-Pathshala, and then Prabha and things like that. Yeah, so that can be accessible from anywhere by anywhere.
There's a question here. How can we ensure the quality of online courses, and are the employers these days ready to accept these courses online? Yeah, definitely. We have heard from Dr. Srinivas saying that, it all depends on the kind of certification that you are looking at, and then how genuinely proctored examinations that you take. Definitely, online courses are now the part of the norm, and they are definitely recognized. But how you go about doing it is very important. So I think we are running short of time. My last question to Vidya ma'am, finally, I would like to ask her, what is the role of a good teacher? This is something which is very important.
Yeah, so
as ma'am being a renowned biologist and such a good teacher, we have heard a lot about you.
Well, thank you. You are very kind. I haven't taught for many years, but I'm very deeply interested in teaching. I think about it a lot. And since you had given this question before, so it gave me time to think about it. And I have only 3 answers. Like, one thing is, like, you'll be really good at your subject. Many teachers, sad to say, they kind of just read what's in the textbook and they just tell it again to the student, and that won't fly anymore, because the student can read the lecture or they can listen to this course somewhere else, like with so many free things like the e-Pathshala or IIT courses or something, right? So there are so many free good courses. So spend a lot of time being a subject expert, so that any question, and so if you're an expert, you can even make good questions, or if somebody asks a question, you can answer them well. And the second thing is, like, to be secure emotionally and feel confident to share with others. I forgot, I think it was Dr. Srinivas was saying that you should just share your open source, your materials, whatever you have created, your notes or your stuff, right? Give the notes to the class before you teach them, so they can be running with the notes instead of trying to write down what you're saying. I would especially say this to the chemistry and biochemistry teachers: do not spend time drawing stuff on the blackboard. Give them the structures, and then you have time to discuss the beauty of the structure, or you give the first structure and last structure and say, look, if I want to go from glucose to carbon dioxide or whatever, what should I do, right? So those kind of things are very good. So whatever is printed, do not do it again, because the person has access to a printed thing. And then the last thing I'll say is, like, do at least one new thing each year, one new thing, like a new type of Don't look in last year's papers to set your question paper is what I will say, right? Many people do that. They, as soon as they have to set a question paper, they'll go and get this huge file and then they will look back third year, fifth year, and then they will make a question paper. So try not to do that. Do at least one new thing, which is a new experiment, a new quiz, a new student interaction, something new, so that you also don't feel the tedium of teaching the same syllabus year after year. Teacher has to remain fresh. If you remain fresh and excited about doing something, that conveys to your students. They also feel the energy from the teacher. So these are the things that I can recommend.
Sister, there's another question here. With your expertise, give your opinion on how much percentage of online and offline would you feel can be the most effective way of blended mode of teaching?
I think for strong students, 20% in person is enough because they can carry 80% themselves, right? But for a weaker student, maybe it should be 60-40.
60-40. Yeah, I think 60-40 would be ideal because they also need to have in-person interaction with the teacher.
Yeah. So 60 in class and 40 on their own. But if there are students who are strong, maybe we could give them the option of having lesser in person. As long as they show that they have completed the work, right? They can move faster, no problem.
So to summarize the discussion that we had today, it was very interesting, and thank you for all of you to coming and participate in this, and for your inputs that you have given. It was really good response that we got from the chat box also. And to sum up, I feel, basically a teacher has to, develop a professionalism in her teaching aspects in terms of how she interacts with the students and how they carry out the assessment strategies, catering to different abilities of each individual, and how they try to bring in problem solving methodologies where they give rise to societal needs, providing solutions to requirements of societal needs. And I think STEM education brings in all this. And as we said, we just discussed that since not only during pandemic, but it is otherwise also becoming a norm that we need to have an online education. And it is one of the important things where as we are catering to the slow learners and the advanced learners, we're giving more and more opportunities for the people who want to build up their own career by their self-learning process. So online education definitely would help students and provide with a lot of opportunities. But the only thing is it has to be done in a proctored and effective manner in which it has to be carried out. Thank you all so much, Dr. Sister Sujata, Dr. Vidya ma'am, and Dr. Jovita Joseph. Thank you for all your inputs and coming in and joining us in this panel discussion. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you also for giving us this opportunity, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, sister.